Shabbat Shalom. A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to share with the Kahal some of the different ways that I think about Israel, and also mentioned a few ideas that were brewing for congregational life for us to really have more of these conversations. There's a person in the room I got to talk with the other day who had this really beautiful framing about my Israel story, an opportunity for each of us to talk about our own personal Israel story and what that might look like. And as we've been thinking about CBST being more effective in the way that it connects people in general, next week Rabbi James and I are going to be meeting on Monday to start to kind of flesh this out a little bit. And the way that we're thinking about it is actually not just gathering a group of people together to simply tell their Israel stories, though that would be lovely too, but we thought it might be nice to actually gather a group of people who might be interested in not only sharing some of their stories, but being trained as facilitators, so that we could really start to have some more of these conversations meaningfully. So I hope more information in the next week or two, but if that's something that's more interesting to you or you might be excited about, feel free to talk to Rabbi James or me as that develops. And tonight, 77 years ago on the Jewish calendar, in the presumably very subtle space on Rothschild Boulevard in Tel Aviv that housed the Tel Aviv Museum of Art, the creation of the State of Israel was proclaimed at 4 p.m. local time. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my Israel story tonight in that spirit. On the secular calendar, May 14th, 1948, was my paternal grandfather's 24th birthday. I would not meet him for 27 more years when I was born on May 14th as well. My grandmother liked to say that I was my grandfather's birthday present. It's very sweet, except at times this statement would be a reflection of complicated family dynamics as well. That's another sermon. What never felt complicated throughout my childhood and teenage years was that I also shared the secular birthday with Israel. So naturally, on Wednesday, May 14, 1986, my 11th and Israel's 38th birthday, keep in mind, Jewish and secular calendars align every 19 years, 19 times 2 equals 38, you kind of get the idea. It seemed like the most natural thing in the world to try to dye the newly minted family cheesecake brownie recipe blue and white. That's right, the brownie mix, I was trying to dye blue. Don't recommend this. But this was to teach my fellow fifth graders a little something, and got them in my secular school to sing happy birthday that day, both to me and of course to Israel on its 38th. That summer, my first at Camp Ramah in the Berkshires, I took that love of Israel I had already developed and amped it up a notch as regular song sessions with our wonderful and happy and enunciative song leader, if that means something to you, and we were probably at Camp Ramah at the same time, introduced popular Jewish Israeli songs to my fellow campers and to me. A few years later, when given options by my parents, I eschewed a fancier bar mitzvah party in favor of a family trip to Israel. The reality is that my parents still worked their tuchuses off cooking for more than 200 people who spent Shabbat afternoon and Saturday night at our house that day. That same year, Sunday Morning with Charles Kuralt decided to interview our seventh grade Hebrew school class about our opinions on, wait for it, the Intifada. In retrospect, I still do not get how this came to be, and I do wonder if it's on the internet at this point. A couple of years later, together with my sister, the four of us were bound on a Tower Airlines 747 for Tel Aviv, August 1st, 1990. We arrived to learn that Iraq had just invaded Kuwait, and then about an hour later, we got into a car accident with our family friend who drove us to the apartment we were renting in Netanya. A stereotypically authentic way to start off our first time experiencing Israel. Why worry about violence in the region when you could just be hurt in a car accident instead? Luckily, we were okay. When we came back to the States 3+ weeks later, the love I had been taught about for Israel had only grown. It took me almost 9 years, not for lack of wanting, but to go back and to live in Jerusalem for a year during rabbinical school. And during those 9 years, I finished high school, went to college, where I hung pride and Israeli flags in my windows, saw Israeli and Palestinian people exchanging handshakes on the White House lawn, watched Rabbi Klein introduce Yael Dayan at the Javits Center at Kol Nidre night, who proceeded to talk to us about the Oslo process, helping to humanize the Jewish people, to regain our humanity at that time. Some people left the room. I attended the funeral of a classmate who had been murdered in a suicide bombing in Jerusalem, was startled one Saturday night to find out that Yitzhak Rabin had been assassinated. And I was confused when many of my Jewish friends admitted at that moment that they were relieved that Bibi Netanyahu would likely succeed him. One night during college, a non-Jewish friend asked me about Israel, and I reassured her that I trusted Israel implicitly. Why? She asked. It's what I was taught growing up. Jewish values, humane defense-oriented army, this kind of thing. Would you ever trust America like that? She asked me. Heck no. Then why do you presume it would be true about Israel? I didn't have a great answer. Indeed, Jewish sacred texts remind us to be critical of governments. The year I lived in Jerusalem during rabbinical school was one in which there was an uptick in housing demolitions of Palestinian people's houses by Jewish people in Jerusalem. I started to see the shadow side of Israel a little more up close by participating in trips with rabbis for human rights. I also had a lot of hope. It seemed like the most right-wing slogan you regularly saw was Ha'amim HaGolan, advocating for Israel to hold on to the occupied Golan Heights. And 4 years after Rabin's assassination, there was still a great deal of sadness about that in the air. Shalom Chaver, Bill Clinton's words, and its variations were on bumper stickers, though there were intermittent anti-Oslo bumper stickers as well. I've been to Gaza exactly once in my life, a long day trip 25 years ago, I think this month. I saw a pristine World War I cemetery, ate an orange pretty much right off a tree, met with Palestinian people in refugee camps, bought one of these lapels, pins with an Israeli and Palestinian flag together in a Palestinian souvenir shop. Drove by the airport that was operating, and walked on the gorgeous, pristine beaches. I've also only regularly traveled to Jewish settlements in the occupied territories once in my life. Of course, I've been here and there over the years, but in terms of doing it regularly to one place, that was the year that I also lived in Jerusalem that year, when I was dating someone who lived in Ariel, the largest Jewish settlement in Samaria, the north part of the West Bank. When we met, and it was my time to go meet him, he said he was going to school between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. I didn't give it that much thought. The first time I traveled there was the first time I appeared to have a woman bus driver in my entire time in Israel. People who wanted her to reopen the back door when she closed it very quickly were yelling, Nahag, driver, in the masculine, and she yelled back at them, Naheget, in the feminine. I was really digging this experience. And at a certain point, I was like, wait, where are we actually going? The lights dimmed, the landscape got darker. We passed a checkpoint. It's like, should I have brought my passport? What's going on here? And that night, when I met him in Ariel, I wondered whether in my evening prayers I should follow the version of Ma'ariv that's for inside or for outside Israel, as it varies. I came home after that year, and the Second Intifada began within a few months of my returning to the States. I was devastated. I remember being particularly devastated months and months in when the airport in Gaza was leveled. For some reason, I think having been there and seen that and understanding the potential of what it represented, that really, really got me. And I went back. Every 6 months or a year during rabbinical school, every 6 months or a year, sometimes more often after rabbinical school, for these past 25 years, seen friends, enjoyed spending time in a place I had lived for a year, had an opportunity to use my Hebrew for days, maybe weeks in a row, tried to learn something new. My love of the land, my love of the people in it and connected to it has never waned. The government and the realities on the ground of how the state has operated have become a more challenging story for me. I shared a few weeks ago that over the years I've become increasingly confused about what a political solution should look like. And simultaneously, I've had increasing clarity that people need to hear each other's stories. Personal trauma and inherited trauma are both real, and some of it is ongoing. So much of it is ongoing. We Jews have to face our roles in Palestinian trauma and destruction, whether in 1948 or whether in the past year and a half. And that doesn't mean that horrible things have happened to us. Last week, we grieved the murders of 6 million Jews, 5 million more deemed not human enough by the Nazis as we marked Yom HaShoah. We marked this week deaths in the military, and Israel is still grieving people murdered on October 7th. What does it mean to be a Jewish state? Is it to be a Jewish majority? Is it to revitalize Hebrew as a lingua franca? To be a destination for Jewish people around the world, so that in the words of Avram Infeld, there need not ever be another Jewish refugee? Maybe some combination, maybe something else. The past week or two, we've had some thoughtful conversations among clergy at CBST about Hatikva, the name of Israel's national anthem that was adopted from 2 lines of a 9-stanza poem called Tikvatenu, Our Hope, written by Naftali Imber. He wrote it in 1878. He came from Europe to the land, to the land of Israel, to the land of the United States. The melody, to my very non-expert ears, Joyce, you can tell me, seems very much like familiar Eastern European folk melodies. Sometimes it seems like Ashkenazi Jews even think in D minor, and I think that has kind of carried into the melody. The conversations that we were having around the office brought in the other day at chorus rehearsal. I wasn't there, but I know it came to the attention of chorus members that I was questioning whether we should sing Hatikva tonight at services. It seems strange to me, I shared with colleagues, that we'd be singing a single national anthem each year. We don't even sing the Star-Spangled Banner around the other Yom HaAtzmaut, the one that we celebrate on July 4th. What does that mean for the anti-Semitic tropes of Jewish loyalty and dual loyalty and which loyalty? If it's our minhag to sing God Bless America in July, maybe we should be singing Sachaki or the 126th Psalm, neither of which has any official status in Israel, but have more universal appeals to an anthem that speaks only about a Jewish home. And why, this is my question, should we sing a national anthem at all at services? This is davening. We are literally living through a time when the danger of conflating religion and nationalism is so poignant, is destroying the best parts of Israel and the best parts of America. So to tell you the truth, in case you didn't realize I was doing that already from my perspective, I was and I am concerned that singing a national anthem in a religious service is doing ourselves, pardon me, a disservice. Yet for some people, myself included, even this conversation felt emotionally weighty, sad even. I know for me, Hatikva is in my kishkas, the melody and the words, the hopefulness of being a free people in our land that the lyrics of the anthem suggest. Od lo avda tikvatenu, we have not yet lost our hope even after 2,000 years. And I also know that from Jewish Israeli citizens to Palestinian Israeli citizens, there have been questions for decades about why it is an anthem about the Jewish story alone, when more than 20% of the people in sovereign Israel, when more like 50% of the people in the land over which Israel has control, are not Jewish at all. Jewish Israelis from the political right, left, and center may wave Israeli flags, as many did the other day, maybe not as many as from the right, to protest Ben Gvir's visit in New York. And maybe they returned home humming Hatikva, because no matter how horrible he is, no matter how horrible this government is, no matter how harmful it is for Israelis, for Palestinians in the land, for Jews and Palestinians in diaspora, Od lo avda tikvatenu. We have still not lost our hope. I have to admit that 25 years after buying the cute little Israeli and Palestinian flags in Gaza, I have become increasingly allergic, as one of my favorite Brown alumni has come to teach me, I have become increasingly allergic to national flags. And I have also become increasingly allergic to national anthems in general, and specifically the coupling them to religious ceremony. Cantor Rosen, however, reminded me earlier this week that, these are his words, no one owns words. Words are not for sale, they have no price. So when words were written 70 years before 1948, just because they're adopted by the state of Israel, which I believe to be operating in many, many ways that are anathema to my sense of anything that represents the best of Jews, Judaism, or Jewish values, the words of Hatikva taken from those 9 stanzas have been a part of the history of the Jewish people from before the state of Israel came to be. They were words that were sang by Jews at Bergen-Belsen upon the camp's liberation by the Allies. And they are words that have been sung by our own congregants, whether in Israel growing up or in the diaspora. That is all real and valid. And meanwhile, the anthem stings people, stings many of the 7 million Palestinian people who live in the land, not to mention those outside it, people who lost their homes in Jerusalem in 1948, Jaffa residents who were expelled to Gaza, whose grandchildren have been murdered on a colossal scale the past year and a half, Palestinian Americans who find their daily existence and humanity is being erased. And that is real and valid. I used to daven in a synagogue in Philadelphia that used 2 or 3 versions of Aleinu. Interestingly, the words of Aleinu, from traditional to different kind of reconstructed forms of it, also raise similar questions about the boundary between Jewish peoplehood and ethnic superiority. There were different minyanim at this synagogue, much like this synagogue. And when all the minyanim would choose to pray together from some special occasion, people made space for one another to say the Aleinu of their choosing, even if it meant saying different words at the same time, even if it meant standing in silence while other people added a line that I might not add. Tonight, we're including the option to sing Hatikva at the end of services. And tonight, I want us to coexist in a space where people can have lots and lots of different thoughts about prayer and religion, about nationalism, and about the power of symbolism. It took me until my 20s to realize that my birthday, May 14th, is the eve of Nakba Day, the commemoration of the expulsion of some 700,000 Palestinian people from their homes in the land of Israel in 1948. Remember, Tom Cruise was in this movie called Born on the 4th of July, seeing when I was a kid, patriotism, Vietnam, this real intensity about what he had taken upon himself. And sometimes I think about my own realization about my own birthday as parallel to my own evolution of a more inclusive vision of the land and its history. Complicated family dynamics. Not, is Jason the favored grandchild because he was born, but how does the whole Jewish people coexist with each other? And how do we coexist with our closest neighbors, Palestinian people? I'm thinking back to 5th grade. Cheesecake brownies, a family recipe, grease 9x9 pan, in heavy 2-quart pot over low heat, melt 6 squares of semi-sweet chocolate and half a cup of butter, 350 vanilla, sugar, smooth, twist the batter, 30 minutes, cut into bars, maybe baked in a pie shape using the same recipe. You could be 11 years old and try to dye the brownies blue unsuccessfully. I have not made cheesecake brownies to add to tonight's Oneg Shabbat celebrations, but I am keenly aware that we, the Jewish people, are still struggling to figure out What is a recipe, or maybe the recipe if there's such a thing, or many recipes, what recipes for Jewish pride and safety look like, while not compromising the value that not one single human being is better than another. Sometimes when we Jews point out other Jews who incite hatred or violence, we are met with whataboutism, which can unfortunately distract us from doing the work. Sometimes it's easy to know what the recipe isn't. It doesn't look like giving Itamar Ben-Gvir a platform. It doesn't look like attacking people in the streets of Brooklyn. One of my Tanakh teachers, Judy, years ago, suggested that she held the perhaps controversial position that a religious Israel would be better than a secular one. I like to imagine that if religious means centering some of the best Jewish values, such as the prophetic call and affirmation in Israel's own Declaration of Independence, not to distinguish between race, creed, or sex, and guarantee full freedom of conscience, worship, education, and culture, that perhaps this could be. This is my hope. Shabbat Shalom.